3,000 years ago, a war began because of a woman. A king lost his wife, a prince stole her away, and an entire civilization prepared to cross the sea to bring her back. According to ancient stories, more than 1,000 ships sailed across the Aegean Sea. Thousands of warriors gathered under powerful kings. Heroes who were believed to be almost like gods marched toward a single city, a city protected by walls so strong that no army could break through them. For 10 long years, the greatest warriors of the ancient world fought outside those walls. And when the city finally fell, it was not because of strength. It was because of a trick, a giant wooden horse. For centuries, people have told this story as one of the greatest legends ever created, a story of love, revenge, heroes, and betrayal. But there is one question that has fascinated historians for generations. Was the Trojan War actually real? Did a city called Troy truly stand against the armies of Greece? Or was it simply a beautiful story created by ancient poets? The strange thing is, the answer may be somewhere between myth and history. Because buried beneath thousands of years of legends, there may be traces of a real war. And to understand what happened, we first have to return to the world of ancient Greece, a world where gods were believed to walk among humans, where kings measured their power through conquest, and where a single decision could change the fate of entire nations. More than 3,000 years ago, near the eastern coast of the Aegean Sea, there was a wealthy and powerful city. Its name was Troy. Today, this region is part of modern-day Turkey. But during the Bronze Age, Troy sat at one of the most important crossroads of the ancient world. Ships traveling between Europe and Asia passed nearby. Merchants carried gold, metals, weapons, and luxury goods through the region. Whoever controlled Troy controlled a valuable gateway between civilizations. According to legend, Troy was ruled by King Priam, a wise and respected ruler who had many sons and daughters. Among them was a young prince named Paris. Unlike great warriors who sought glory on the battlefield, Paris was known for his charm and beauty. But one day, a choice he made would bring disaster not only to his own city, but to the entire ancient world. The story begins with 3 goddesses, Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite. According to Greek mythology, they argued over who was the most beautiful. To settle the dispute, they chose Paris to make the decision. Each goddess offered him a reward. Hera promised power. Athena promised wisdom and victory in battle. But Aphrodite offered something different. She promised him the most beautiful woman in the world. Paris chose Aphrodite, and the woman she promised was Helen, Helen of Sparta. Ancient writers described her as a woman whose beauty was beyond comparison. A woman so beautiful that kings and heroes competed for the chance to marry her. Eventually, Helen became the wife of Menelaus, the king of Sparta. For a time, everything seemed peaceful. But according to legend, Paris traveled to Sparta and met Helen. And then something happened that would change history forever. Paris took Helen back to Troy. Some ancient stories say he kidnapped her. Others suggest Helen left willingly. Even today, historians cannot know what truly happened. But in the eyes of the Greek kings, the result was the same. Their honor had been challenged, and they demanded revenge. Menelaus could not simply accept the loss of his wife. In the ancient world, a king who allowed such an insult to go unanswered risked losing his reputation and power. So he called upon his brother, Agamemnon, the powerful king of Mycenae. Together they gathered the greatest warriors from across Greece, kings who had promised to fight, soldiers who dreamed of glory, heroes whose names would survive for thousands of years. Among them was Achilles, the greatest warrior of the Greek world. According to legend, Achilles was almost impossible to defeat. His mother, The sea goddess Thetis wanted to protect him from death. One story says she dipped him into the magical river Styx, making his body invulnerable. But she held him by his heel. That small place remained vulnerable, and this tiny weakness would eventually become one of the most famous stories in human history. But Achilles was not just powerful, he was proud. He did not fight only for kings, he fought for honor. For him, being remembered was more important than simply staying alive, and that idea would define his entire life. On the other side stood another legendary warrior, Hector, the oldest son of King Priam. Unlike Achilles, Hector was not fighting for fame. He was fighting for his home, for his wife, for his child, for the people behind the walls of Troy. If Achilles represented glory, Hector represented duty. Two warriors, two different ideas of what it meant to be a hero, and soon they would meet on the battlefield. When the Greek fleet finally sailed toward Troy, it was one of the greatest military expeditions the ancient world had ever imagined. Thousands of soldiers crossed the sea. Hundreds of ships filled the horizon. From a distance, the Greek army must have looked unstoppable. But when they arrived at Troy, they discovered something unexpected. The city was not an easy target. Its massive walls stood between them and victory. The Trojans refused to surrender, and the Greeks could not break through. Days became months. Months became years. The war continued. 10 years passed. A generation of soldiers grew up knowing nothing except battle. The beaches outside Troy became a place where heroes were born, and where many would die. But the greatest tragedy of the war was not caused by armies. It was caused by pride, because even among the Greek warriors, there was conflict. One day, Achilles and Agamemnon, the leader of the Greek forces, had a bitter argument. Both men believed they deserved respect. Neither was willing to give in, and eventually, Achilles walked away from the battlefield. Without their greatest warrior, the Greeks began to suffer. The Trojans pushed forward. Their attacks became stronger, and Hector, defending his city, became the symbol of hope for his people. But then the war took a darker turn, because in a conflict that had already lasted 10 years, one personal loss would awaken the rage of Achilles. They attacked the walls, they fought countless battles, they sent their greatest warriors into combat, but nothing worked. The city remained standing. And this was the greatest advantage Troy had. Its walls were not just physical barriers. They became a symbol of hope. Every morning, the Trojan soldiers looked at those walls and believed one thing. As long as the walls remained, Troy could never be destroyed. But the Greeks had learned a painful lesson. Sometimes the strongest fortress cannot be defeated by force. It must be defeated by an idea. And the man who understood this better than anyone was Odysseus. Unlike Achilles, Odysseus was not famous because of his strength. Unlike Hector, he was not remembered because of his courage on the battlefield. His greatest weapon was his mind. He was known as a master strategist, a man who could turn impossible situations into victories. And after 10 years of war, he finally proposed a plan that would change the fate of Troy forever. A plan that would become one of the most famous tricks in human history. The Greeks would stop trying to break through the walls. Instead, they would make the Trojans open the gates themselves. According to legend, the Greeks built an enormous wooden horse. It was not a weapon. It was not a machine of war. From the outside, it looked like a gift, a symbol of surrender. The Greeks placed their best warriors inside the hollow wooden structure, including Odysseus himself. Then the Greek army pretended to leave. Their ships disappeared from the shore. The battlefield became silent. After 10 years of endless fighting, the Trojans finally saw something they had almost forgotten: peace. When the Trojan people discovered the giant wooden horse outside their city, they were confused. Why would the Greeks leave behind such a strange object? Some believed it was a trap. A Trojan priest named Laocoon warned them. According to the famous story, he shouted, "Do not trust the Greeks, even when they bring gifts." But the Trojans ignored his warning. They believed the war was over. They believed they had won. And slowly, they pulled the wooden horse through the gates of Troy. That night, the city celebrated. After a decade of suffering, the people of Troy finally believed they were safe. They drank, they danced, they celebrated their victory. But hidden inside the wooden horse, Greek soldiers waited in silence, waiting for the perfect moment. When the city fell asleep, they climbed out. They opened the gates, and the Greek army, which had been hiding nearby, returned. The city that had survived 10 years of war was defeated in a single night. Troy burned, its people were killed or captured, and the greatest city of the ancient world became a legend. A legend about pride, a legend about deception, a legend about how intelligence could defeat strength. But there was one problem. The Trojan horse is one of the most famous stories ever told. Yet it might not have happened exactly the way we imagine. Because the strange truth about the Trojan War is that the most famous parts of the story are also the parts historians know the least about. The wooden horse, the gods fighting above the battlefield, Achilles becoming almost invincible. These are elements of mythology, but hidden underneath those myths, there may be something real. For centuries, many people believed Troy was nothing more than a fictional city. After all, the story came from ancient poems, the most famous being the Iliad, traditionally attributed to the Greek poet Homer. The poem describes gods controlling battles, warriors with supernatural abilities, and heroes whose strength seemed beyond human. To many scholars, it looked like mythology, a story created to entertain, a story passed down from generation to generation. But then, in the 19th century, something unexpected happened. A man named Heinrich Schliemann became convinced that Troy was real. At the time, many historians believed the city described in Homer's poems was only a legend. But Schliemann refused to accept that. He believed ancient stories often contained pieces of forgotten history, so he searched for the location of Troy. Eventually, he focused on a hill called Hisarlik in modern-day Turkey, and when archaeologists began digging there, they discovered something extraordinary. Beneath the ground were the remains of multiple ancient cities built on top of each other, layer after layer, civilization after civilization. And one of these layers dated back to roughly the same period when the Trojan War was believed to have happened. Suddenly, the impossible question became possible. What if Troy was real? What if Homer was not simply creating a fantasy? What if behind thousands of years of legends, there was a real city? Today, most historians agree on one thing. A city called Troy did exist. The ruins are real. The location was real. And around the Late Bronze Age, roughly 1,200 years before the birth of Christ, this region experienced conflict and destruction. But the bigger question is much harder. Did the legendary Trojan War happen exactly as Homer described? Did thousands of Greek warriors really fight for 10 years? Was Helen really the reason? Did Achilles and Hector truly walk on the battlefield? Did a wooden horse really bring down the city? The answer is probably more complicated. History is rarely as simple as a story. A real event can become larger with every generation that tells it. A small battle can become a legendary war. A powerful warrior can become a hero touched by the gods. A clever military trick can become an unforgettable symbol. This happens because humans do not only remember facts, we remember stories. And sometimes, stories survive longer than the people who created them. Many historians believe there may have been a real conflict between the Mycenaean Greeks and the people who lived in Troy. The Bronze Age was a dangerous time. Powerful kingdoms competed for trade routes, resources, and influence. Cities were destroyed, civilizations disappeared, and Troy was located in a place worth fighting for. So perhaps Homer's story was built on the memory of a real war, a conflict that happened thousands of years earlier, then grew larger every time someone told it. The same way a small spark can become a huge fire. But even if some parts of the story are fictional, that does not make the Trojan War meaningless. Because the reason this story survived for 3,000 years is not because of the battles. It is because of the people. Achilles was not remembered because he was the strongest warrior. He was remembered because he represented a question humans still struggle with today. Is it better to live a long life without glory, or a short life that people will never forget? Hector was remembered because he showed another kind of courage. Not the courage to seek fame, but the courage to protect the people you love, even when you know you may lose. Odysseus was remembered because he showed the power of intelligence, that sometimes the greatest victories are not won with weapons, but with ideas. And perhaps this is why the Trojan War continues to fascinate us. Because somewhere between myth and history, between imagination and reality, there is something deeply human. A story about ambition, a story about love, a story about revenge, a story about how one decision can change the destiny of thousands. So, was the Trojan War real? Maybe the city was real? Maybe a war really happened? Maybe Homer preserved the memory of an ancient conflict that would have otherwise disappeared forever. Or maybe the greatest achievement of the Trojan War was not defeating a city, but creating a story powerful enough to survive for 3,000 years. Because sometimes, the most incredible mysteries in history are not the ones where we find a clear answer. They are the ones that continue to make us ask questions. And the story of Troy remains one of the greatest questions humanity has ever asked. Where does history end? And where does legend begin? This is Enigma Files. If you enjoy stories where history, mystery, and human ambition collide, subscribe and join us as we uncover the world's greatest unanswered stories.